Well, hello. Welcome to Women in Armed Conflict seminar. My name is Elena Kim. I'm a psychology professor at the American University of Central Asia in Bishkek, Kyrgyzstan, currently a visiting professor in Bard College at Annandale, New York. So I'm here to welcome you to the Women in Armed Conflict webinar. This webinar is organized by the Open Society University Network Gender Equity Working Group. And it's my honor to say hello, to be the first one to say hello to you. So Women in Armed Conflict is our first event, and it will be followed by a series of online activities dedicated to Women's History Month in March 2023. Our goals are to raise awareness and initiate conversations on broad range of topics related to gender equality and equity. Today, our conversation, as the title suggests, focuses on women in armed conflict, which we hope will generate more understanding about perspectives and experiences of women in war and in situations of military aggression. Our premises are manifold. First, we want to recognize that women and girls face multiple gender-based challenges in the situation of military invasion, occupation, and conflict. But second, we believe that such discussions must include how women have emerged as more visible actors in armed conflicts. We discussed today specific examples of how women in the war continue and actively fight for their rights, fight for independence of their states. They challenge traditional norms and fight gender discrimination in the armed forces, and they reclaim their space, their voices, their recognition, their respect, not only as participants, but sometimes as leaders in revolutions and resistance. So we break open the stereotype of women as victim and explore these multiple, complex, nuanced, sometimes conflicting roles women play in conflict. The fighters, the humanitarians, the mothers, the daughters, the laborers, the community leaders, they're also survivors. So we have two fascinating panelists today whose introductions will follow shortly. And for this and for moderating our panel, I'm excited to hand over to Zarlasht Sarmast, who's the program coordinator, OSUN Global Engagement Fellow program, who's also an activist. Zarlasht is a director and CEO of the project Afghanistan Politics on the Verge of Transformation. Zarlasht, I'm so happy you're here with us. We have you as a moderator, and the floor is all yours.
Thank you very much, Elena. And I would also take my turn to welcome everyone to today's panel, and thank you all for taking time to be a part of this important conversation. And we are very much looking forward to getting your questions, thoughts, and comments towards the end of our panel. We are going to dedicate some time for that towards the end. I think everything else regarding to the panel was mentioned already. Our panelists are going to be talking and having a conversation about the role that gender plays in conflict, war, violence, and the peace process, and also the in the post-conflict context. So I would like to, first of all, invite our lovely panelists and thank them again for their time and sharing their voices and their stories with us today through this panel. And I would like to first invite Sweeta and then Tamara to give you a full introduction, and we'll take it from there.
Thank you, Zarlasht. Hello, everyone. This is Sweeta, Akbari. I'm so glad to be here today, and thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to speak here and be as a panelist here, and also to share my story and the challenge of Afghan women in Afghanistan. Shall I continue with my presentation, Zarlasht?
We're going to get to the presentations after the introductions. So let's give the floor to Tamara
Yes.
whenever you're done, and then we'll proceed with the rest.
Thank you.
Yeah, hello everyone. Thanks a lot for organizing this event. My name is Tamara Martsenyuk. I am a sociologist and gender scholar from Ukraine, University of Kyiv-Mohyla Academy, Department of Sociology. Since 2014, when war in Donbass started, I do research together with initiated by military women in Ukraine about gender discrimination in the armed forces of Ukraine. And after the full-scale invasion, I stayed in the capital, Kyiv, for 10 days and was forced to evacuate. And currently I am a refugee scholar hosted by Free University of Berlin and Leofana University Lüneburg. Thanks a lot again for organizing this event, and I will be very glad to present my research results.
Thank you very much, Tamara and Sweeta, for your introductions. And thank you again for being here. We have some really interesting presentations prepared by our panelists, Sweeta and Tamara. But before we go to that, I would like to invite Elena Kim again to talk a little bit about the work that has been done so far through the OSUN network, particularly about this topic. I know that it was covered, but I just want to make sure that we've covered that and there is nothing missed, and then we will move on with the PPTs.
Thank you, Zarlasht, for giving me so much floor today. I think I said in the very beginning the general framing of our conversation and how different this event is from the mainstream talks about the connections between women, peace, conflict, and security. But I'd like to take this opportunity and thank Tamara and Sweeta for accepting our invitation. And they're being very modest, but there is a lot of work done by both our panelists. Tamara is a well-known researcher on gender, on power, and now on the intersections between women's state and war in relation to Ukrainian women. There's a lot of publications that one can read that Tamara authored, which I myself was very excited to read. And Sweeta is an activist who really changes the lives of many Afghani women whose educational opportunities are curbed by what's going on in Afghanistan. I thank you again, and I can't wait to hear your presentations today. Let's move on directly to your stories.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Elena. Our first presenter will be Tamara, and then followed by Sweeta. So Tamara, I pass the floor to you now.
Thanks a lot. So I'm sharing my screen, and I have quite a challenging topic because it's only 20 minutes to represent my research results, and I will be talking about women's participation in defending Ukraine in Russia's war. And this women's involvement in war, in gender and war literature, could be analyzed actually through two major perspectives that I will show: agency and victimhood. Also, I pay attention to the fact that there is a legacy of resistance since 2014. Already for 8 years there is war in Ukraine, and so armed forces of Ukraine changed a lot with the integration of women in it. And I would say dignity and professionalism is becoming major values for the armed forces of Ukraine. Also, there are different forms of resistance. I will mention mainly military, but there are volunteer, community, cultural, symbolic. Also, I do believe that via analysis of women's participation in the war, it's possible to understand better why and how the Ukrainian society resists. because when full-scale invasion happened, we could see in media also that international community was expected that actually Ukraine, or at least, capital Kyiv, some other parts, they will be occupied for 3 days, but already for more than 9 months, Ukrainian society resists, and women, they are taking quite active part. When we analyze women's involvement in war in the literature on gender and war, gender and nation, and for Ukrainian case, nation building and fighting for independence, it's a big issue for the last 300 years. So mainly women's involvement in war is analyzed through the victimhood. And indeed, women are victims of the situations. They are those who suffer and belong from different vulnerable groups. And in Ukraine, after full-scale invasion, we could see that women became survivors of sexual violence. Also, women are majority among refugees. Around 90% of refugees of war are women and children, and it's really vulnerable positions. But at the same time, women, even though who are refugees, they don't want, that they are perceived mainly through victimhood. And I do think that we need to pay attention to the agency, even despite the vulnerable position. And in my research, I try to analyze how women are actors of resistance. And first of all, when we talk about agency and equal rights and opportunities of participation in the public life, I'd like to show briefly Ukrainian gender politics and gender equality implementation. Among other former Soviet Union countries, Ukraine has rather well developed official gender politics, and at the national level, gender equality is guaranteed, first of all, by the constitution, secondly, by the particular law on ensuring equal rights and opportunities of women and men. That is more than 15 years ago was adopted. Also at the international level, Ukraine ratified major gender equality legislation, among them, of course, United Nations Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination against Women. And what is very important, during this terrible events, Ukraine finally ratified the Council of Europe Convention on Preventing and Combating Violence Against Women and Domestic Violence, so-called Istanbul Convention. At the same time, because of war, gender equality is being also implemented in the security sector. Ukraine signed United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325 on women, peace and security. Currently, there is second national action plan for the period till 2025. And so on the official level, women's involvement and agency in different spheres of the society, in labor market and particularly in military labor market, is implemented. And when I would say the very important and interesting point of women's visibility happened during the Revolution of Dignity. It's the metaphorical name of Euromaidan protests that happened during 3-4 months in 2013-14. I show in my articles that Ukrainian women, they managed to challenge traditional gender roles as caretakers and victims of conflict, and they reclaimed visibility, recognition, and respect as revolutionaries and volunteers. Dignity became the very important value in the future for participants of this protest, and it's one of the major value that is also currently important in the armed forces. When Crimea was annexed by Russia, and when war in Donbass started, women, they joined front lines as volunteers, journalists, medical staff, and also as military on combat positions. And it was not actually possible for women to hold some combat positions, and these military women, they were asked to conduct sociological study to demonstrate the problem of gender discrimination in the military as a labor market. And together with my colleagues from my Department of Sociology, Kyiv-Mohyla Academy, we conducted a series of sociological studies that we metaphorically called Invisible Battalion. The first study was in 2015, where we interviewed around 50 women, also military men, experts, and we demonstrated the problem of gender discrimination in the armed forces. And as a result, our respondents, they actually decided to fight for their visibility. And later, so you may check our webpage, Invisible Battalion. There is documentary you see here in screenshot with 6 live stories of military women. And military women became, I would say, eager to fight for their rights. Later, we conducted second study to make needs and visibility of women veterans. And in general, women veterans movement is quite visible actor in Ukraine. Later on, it became possible to study very taboo topic for all armed forces in the world. It's sexual harassment, gender-based violence, and we conducted this study. And to raise this issue, also we prepared online course for military and interested people on gender equality and combating sexual harassment in the military. And actually, currently, for the 2 years, already 25,000 people, they received certificates as a result of this course. And we are just finalizing research on women's access to military education, because it's also very, I would say, important sphere for women's access to labor market. And just to show you some sociological data for the situation of women in armed forces. 1 year ago, data demonstrate that the total number of service women was around 33,000. That is 20%, which of course mainly women, they hold so-called female positions like information support, logistics, psychology, and other stuff, but around 100 combat positions like snipers, air reconnaissance, driving of military vehicles, and others opened for women. Also, women, as a result of Donbass war, around 70,000 women, they became veterans of the war, and they are quite visible. Women's veterans movement is quite a visible actor in veterans activism. Around 10 women, they died during the Donbass war. Currently, as a result of invasion, of course, more women died. For women, it became possible to challenge also not only horizontal, but vertical gender segregation of military as a labor market, to break glass ceiling, because a couple of years ago, first a woman obtained a status of general, Lyudmila Shogalei, and also former president of Ukraine, Petro Poroshenko, signed a particular law on equal rights for women and men while serving in the armed forces of Ukraine and other military formations. Despite the fact that obligatory draft for men is not perceived as discrimination based on sex, as gender discrimination, especially in contract military service, women have equal rights and opportunities with men. And also to demonstrate in general the willingness of Ukrainian society and women to resist, I want to present results of representative all-Ukrainian national study conducted 1 week after invasion in the beginning of March. 67% of Ukrainians, they said that they are ready to personally participate in the armed resistance to end the Russian occupation of Ukraine. And among them, women, like 60% of women are willing to do this. Of course, it doesn't mean that all these women, they go to fight with arms, but this the idea, and the willingness to resist is also an important factor in general in the resistance of the Ukrainian society. Just to summarize some successes of gender equality implementation in the security sector. As I already said, it's access of women to military occupation, among them combat ones, recognition of female veterans, gender equality in military legislation, improved protection of women from gender-based violence in general and sexual violence, sexual harassment particularly. And with Istanbul Convention ratification, it will be even more. Access to military education at all levels. That was opened for girls, and actually recently girls graduated from the most prestigious Ivan Bogun Military College of Ukraine, that is in Kyiv. It's also gender trainings and education for staff, and it's the role of sociological research in the changes of gender politics. And here you could see our initiator of Invisible Battalion, Maria Baranlinska. She is graduate from my university, Kyiv-Mohyla Academy, and she actually, she was organizing air reconnaissance, but driving drones was not allowed for women. So Maria, she initiated this whole study, and she became veteran with disability. As you could see, she was injured during war, and women's rights advocates. And despite the fact that in general women are those who are supposed to ask for peace negotiation in the situation of Russian invasion in Ukraine, Ukrainian women, even those who are human rights advocates, they ask for weapon for Ukraine. The same is with a very famous woman, Alexandra Matvichuk. She's human rights defender, and she, as other women, coordinates documentation of war crimes, Tribunal for Putin Coalition. Recently, Alexandra got Nobel Peace Prize, and actually a couple of days ago she had a very powerful speech in Oslo when she received this prize. So Alexandra also forced to ask for heavy weapon because it's a necessity, and peace in the current situation, peace is not possible without victory. A very sensitive and interesting issue for discussion is feminism and militarism, and different feminism, I would say, attitudes towards war. And in the situation of Ukraine, you could see that feminists, even those who are critical to militarization, they do believe that pacifism will kill, and the Russia's war crimes have left us with no option. So you see articles where feminists like Daria Cymbaluk, Irina Zamoraeva, they write like why we as a feminist must lobby for air defense for Ukraine. Another famous feminist who is founder of Gender in Detail online resource, Tamara, she also supports #campaign Arm Ukraine Now, and explains why in the situation with Ukraine, this is very important, and why transnational feminism should support also Ukraine with this request. Women, they not only participate in different military resistance, they of course are doing a lot of community volunteer work. And here just some, due to the lack of time, so I can't show all diverse types of involvement that women do, but as far as women are majority of refugees, so they organize and participate in protests abroad. Here picture from protest from Berlin, where I participated with the slogan on embargo to Russian gas and oil. Women do a lot of diplomacy also in international arena, and also what is very interesting, women do symbolic or cultural resistance. You know, when you see how in general, when you follow social media connected with this war and the specificity of current war, that it's possible to see everything, you know, online on videos, you could see that humor is an issue that is important also in online. And here's one of the example of symbolic resistance of Ukrainian women, witches on broom, who say, you know, дівчатка, закриємо небо, girls, let's close the sky, in the situation when, you know, international community, neighbors are not providing help with the sky protection. So these forms of symbolic resistance, at least online, is also, you know, very important. And for here I will stop. I'm very grateful for your attention, and would be glad to answer your questions later.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Tamara. I also have one question, but I think it's best if we probably get through all the presentations and then we can start the Q&A session. Thank you again for this insightful and informative presentation. There was a lot of new information included, especially for me, like the amount of women who are actively participating. We always hear different things through media and social media, but this was very educating for me and hopefully for a lot of our audience. So thank you very much for taking time and putting all this information together. And I would also like to ask our audience to keep notes of their questions. We are going to have a fruitful Q&A session towards the end of our panel, and we're going to have time for that. With that being said, I am now going to pass the floor to Sweeta Akbari to share with us her thoughts and her story.
Thank you, Zarlasht. Hello again, everyone. I hope everyone can see the slides I'm sharing here.
Yep.
And thank you. So as I had a little bit about my background before, about myself before, and I maybe had a cat on my introduction. So this is Sweeta Akbari again. I'm the former academic advisor to the Ministry of Higher Education of Afghanistan, and currently I'm a postdoc researcher in Finland at Tamara University in Finland, and at the same time I'm the CEO and co-founder of Afghan Women Scholars, which is an organization based in Finland. So today I'm going to discuss here about the challenges that female students and scholars are facing in Afghanistan since last year, and also a little bit of my story, that my story could be the story of every Afghan woman scholars who want to leave the country or who is still at in Afghanistan or suffering the situation. Since last year, what we lost as a female academician and students The women in Afghanistan had many achievements since the first collapse of Afghanistan 20 years ago or 22 years ago, but what they all achieved within this time, every effort they made within these 22 years is lost since last year. And women of Afghanistan also lost the freedom of academic activities. It is so hard at the current situation in Afghanistan that women have their academic activities within the universities or inside universities out of the official time or the time allocated for them by the Taliban. It is told to them that they must leave the university as soon as possible, or as long as the last lecture is finished, then they need to leave the country, since academicians, especially many of the fields, needs more facilities of university to stay at university, but unfortunately they don't have this opportunity to stay there for their research or some other academic activities. As well as it's not able anymore to join international academic events or to travel for education alone outside of the country for every woman and female students in Afghanistan, and at the same time for the scholars. I haven't seen in any country like for traveling to international events like conferences or exhibitions that any woman should also apply for extra visa or another visa for the from the organizer of these events to provide for the male guardian to carry or to travel with them at the same time. I don't think any of international events provide such facilities for the participants of any event and outside of the country. I have been in Malaysia for more than 7 years. Malaysia is basically an Islamic country, and as a Muslim, I have never seen any restriction, or I have never faced any restrictions during my academic works, my travel within or outside of the country in Malaysia, and not at all any problem due to Islamic restrictions or anything that they mentioned. I'm not sure why Taliban are doing and making these rules in Afghanistan for women. No choice to select educational fields such as engineering, agriculture, veterinary, economics, and journalism at university level. Female students are not able anymore to select these fields to enter or to continue their education in universities. Academic achievements has been limited due to many limitations to gender equality and many other that we can see every day in social medias and many other news. Although news are not the real that we can see in many channels outside of Afghanistan due to some restrictions by the Taliban leaders. 2021 was the year of losing opportunities, hopes, and many things for the people of Afghanistan, especially for the women in Afghanistan. April 2021, if I'm talking about my own story, I achieved my dreams of being a doctor in my field, PhD in chemical engineering, but a 4 years of successful PhD journey ended up with the loss of my achievements, my all academic achievements when I was in Afghanistan and I was stuck there. August 2021, I lost my all dreams as a PhD holder by losing my country and my freedom of work. There was no option for me even to think that what I'm going to do for the future of my country and what is my future plan. This not happen only to me, but this is the story of every woman in Afghanistan, despite of their standing and despite of their major part in calling to the international community and asking them for their rights. But unfortunately, so far, there is no response from the international community for the women's right and their work for education, for their works and for their education since the fall of Afghanistan. My story today to share here is the story of every Afghan or every Afghan child or youth that I'm sharing are the same. I born in Kabul in 1988, being a 4 years child, and I always run with my family due to war and insecurity around the country. Every Afghan child has experienced the war and chaos in Afghanistan in the last 45 years, a long-term war in Afghanistan. Many left with families, many stayed and hoped for the better future. However, the situation was almost the same despite of some but we had just little bit of good time, or at least some time for within Afghanistan. But we never left the country until we lost our hope last year. 2021, before the collapse of Afghanistan, 3 months of war and night bombing ended up with the fall of our city called Jawzjan in the north of Afghanistan. It was the second city fall to the Taliban's hand. And it was the story of the beginning of the saddest stories in Afghanistan for many people. My journey of seeking safety with my family started from here, despite of no hope, no freedom, no security, unknown situation, and no supports. I was continuously applying for many positions outside of the country. Just I'm the example of one of those scholars that I'm mentioning this. But unfortunately, getting a response from international community, it's not about only international community. Getting a response as a scholar from universities around the world or from professors are so difficult to have a positive response or even no response from them as an Afghan scholar. And I was continuously asking and applying for many positions outside of Afghanistan, but no result even now, until now that I'm already in Finland. Despite of having high qualification, many scholars are still at risk inside Afghanistan and suffering with the situation. How my journey started to Finland and how I came to here, it's just a difficult journey with the support of Anina Rautalahti. She is a Finnish citizen. She is just a student and studying in social sciences, but her support and her idea helped me to come to Finland. She was one of my connections in LinkedIn, and she suggested me during the war that how if I continue some applications to Tampere University in Finland, and I was happy to accept her suggestion and what I applied. Luckily, we got invitation letters from Tampere University. I'm calling we because that was I and my husband was there, and we both had a PhD from Malaysia, and my husband was assistant professor at Jawzjan University. So with lots of problems and facing many obstacles, many risks during traveling from one city to another city to leave the country, it was really a hard and very horrible story on that time to face every checkpoint of the Taliban and to leave the country. Finally, we moved to a second country, and after staying there, because I didn't have much time, I need to hurry up and leave the country due to my pregnancy. And I need to leave the country as soon as possible. Finally, I made it, and we came to Finland last year, December in here. Unfortunately, I didn't get any support on that time. I came as a self-sponsored scholar to here, but my husband got a few months of support from the university to continue his postdoc research here. And the good news after that after a year almost, we both received funding from International Institute of International Education Scholar Rescue Fund and Finnish National Agency for Education, which is called EDOFI, to continue our education, our postdoc research at Tampere University. And currently we are working here for a 1-year contract. After that, the story of Afghan Women Scholars Organization begins here, that I and Anina decided to how we can support other Afghan scholars who stuck in Afghanistan, and to support them to continue their higher education, and as well as finding some academic position outside of the country. We founded Afghan Women Scholars in this year, early March, and after that we tried to contact many universities, organizations, and foundations to support these Afghan women applicants that we have within this time. We have more than 50 applications from within Afghanistan, and some of our applicants are already in neighboring countries in Afghanistan. The response of universities, international organizations, foundations, and individuals are very important for for the support of our applicants at Afghan women scholars, and we are hoping that we can support some of those scholars that applied. The good news is here that so far we were able to introduce one of our applicants to Thailand for higher education, doing a master with a full scholarship, and another to Costa Rica with a full scholarship study. This is the web page of Afghan women scholars, and also you can see the website here. If anyone is interested, they can go and see that what we are doing and what we are looking for our applicants here inside the website. And you can see in here that how those who are interested to support and also those who are seeking for supports can apply through our website. This organization is basically now registered in Finland, and we are supporting Afghan women scholars. As an example, again, what I lost as a female researcher and medalist, academic medalist in Afghanistan. My dream to improve the higher education system in Afghanistan, in academic research in Afghanistan, we lost this. My position as an editor-in-chief and founder of international journal that I created for the people of Afghanistan. Actually, it was an international for all scholars, but initially for people of Afghanistan, to make an easy process for them for their publication. We lost this opportunity, and we lost also the journal to help these people. I lost my all medals achieved during international exhibitions. I couldn't bring any of my achievements due to many checkpoints and many other risks at Afghanistan. My husband lost his job as a stunt professor of Jawzjan University, and also that's the sad thing that seeking for a safe academic environment led to leave of our country, family, and friends. And after that all, we are here, and we are happy in Finland, but of course, being far from your country and your people is always suffering moments. This is how that everyone who are interested, how they can contact us to have more information about Afghan women scholars are here. You can go and you can find the websites and also our contacts here. And thank you so much for your time. I'm happy to answer any question. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Sweeta. This was, I understand, talking about these experiences are not very easy, especially having to leave your country and loved ones and everything behind at a time where your own dreams are shattered. I think that there is a lot in common between both of the presentations. Many of the women, when it comes to armed conflict, my personal view is that women suffer the most comparing to other communities and other groups in a society. So I totally get how hard this must have been. And I want to say thank you again for taking the time to share your experiences. Before we open the floor to questions to our colleagues and other participants who are attending this panel and listening to your stories, I had two questions. My first question is to Tamara, and I just wanted to ask, how do you think, or how does the writing in, through, or with and against a very personal moment of conflict impacts your own work in gender inequality?
Thanks a lot. As you will see, I'm a scholar, but of course I have other identities that very often intersect. First of all, I'm a citizen of my country that was attacked, and I'm a refugee scholar. And actually, I would say what I face, it's reconciliation of all these identities, and we're in the situation of first shock from invasion and bombing, when you woke up from explosions, and you are expected to participate in events commenting on this war, on this invasion, but it may not be so easy to do this because you're in a bit shock. So I would say that what was very important for me, and what I'm grateful, it's a solidarity from my colleagues, international colleagues, who's been contacting constantly and proposing, for relocation, even though it was not so easy to do this after first days. And in the very beginning, actually, I decided that I will stay in Kyiv. But this, this academic solidarity, I would say it's very important, and to continue your research that was interrupted by war, and continue teaching. I am not only a researcher, but I do teach, and of course it's quite challenging now in the situation of where half of energy system of Ukraine is destroyed. And once I was teaching, and my students, they were telling me during my course Gender and Politics, where they've been presenting their research results, as they could hear bombing. And so it's not, I would say it's not so easy, but we do, university community, we do our best to continue this, because you understand that universities, they are not neutral. They are, I would say, soft power that is used also on the political level. And from one hand, I could experience solidarity of my, international colleagues, especially, from Europe, from countries that are very close to Ukraine. At the same time, I would experience lack of solidarity from Russian colleagues and Russian scholars. It was, I was in a bit shocked to, for example, to learn that a couple of weeks after invasion, or even 1 week, the rectors of the Union of Russian Rectors, they released common letter where they support invasion. And so it was not so easy also to be in the same refugee scholarships together with colleagues from, from countries like Russia and Belarus, because we are absolutely on different types of risks. And in my case, Russian professors used this scholarships, not even women, so they are those who have contacts in this area studies. And my mission, when I see, even with my research currently, of course, is to explain why and how Ukrainian society resists, to make Ukrainian studies more visible in the Russians, in this area studies, because, there is this common umbrella of Russian, Eastern European, Eurasian studies, and somehow Russian studies are perceived to be like the major one. But our societies, after collapse of Soviet Union, followed absolutely, different paths. And I think it's very important, to explain and to decolonize. Yes, so this decolonization also of academia, especially abroad. For I would say, one of also my mission as a scholar and as a writer, and to challenge, some theories to explain people why feminists support Arm Ukraine now, as I explained to you before. So it may not be so easy. At the same time, I am very grateful for also this national feminist support, where, feminist scholars from different countries, they show the solidarity, organize events, they try to understand, they provide voice for Ukrainian feminists and scholars, and they want to learn more about the status of Ukrainian women. So, of course, I'm very grateful also to organizers who are doing this, what I explained before. So thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Following that up, I have one more question for Sweeta on her presentation and the work that she's doing, and then we're going to open the floor to our colleagues and audience. So Sweeta, I wanted to ask, what are some of the challenges you see moving forward, and how can the OSUN network or other networks that are out there can support you and the work that you're doing?
Thank you, Zarlasht. We know that as an Afghan woman or female, being a female in Afghanistan at this time is something that you need to be brave, and you should never be disappointed. Otherwise, you could not come up with the situation at this time. And being in Afghanistan, of course, is more risky, but you should still go and seek for your goals and for your dreams. You have to be strong enough to continue all your activities. Yeah, for me the same. It was difficult to find an opportunity to leave the country, because as a scholar, as a researcher, it's not easy to just leave the country or to stay in a second country without any support. The challenges were there a lot, as I mentioned before, that when we apply to many universities, there might be some problems with the canon ideas, or I'm not sure what is that can be called, that universities cannot accept the Afghan scholars easily. Indeed, or to be honest, compared to other citizens, it is very difficult for Afghan scholars to leave the country or to get any acceptance from some high-ranking universities outside of the country, especially in Europe and USA or some other countries. Indeed, I gone on through all these problems, and it was a challenging journey for me. And finally, I made it to get some sponsorship or fellowship from the Scholar Rescue Fund and EduFi, and I'm happy that I'm doing now 1 year of research to update my knowledge and my experience, and to not keep it just. And I'm going on to investigate more on my field of research and to share it with international networks. And I'm happy that I'm doing all these activities. And of course, having network from outside of community is very important. As we founded Afghan Women Scholars, this can be also a network for the women of Afghanistan who are currently within the country and seeking for the safety. We are actually a bridge of trust between those women applicants and the organization or foundations and universities outside of the country. So we welcome any sponsorship or any invitation letter from those organizations and universities to support our scholars.
Thank you very much. I wish the both of you best of luck, and I am really happy to know that there are women, examples of women like you who've been through a very difficult time, but you didn't give up, and that you are now trying to find ways to support other women who are facing similar experiences. Your stories are very inspiring and very touching, and from the bottom of my heart, again, thank you for being here. Thank you for talking about something that I understand how difficult it could be, because I also come from Afghanistan. I have lived there, and I have many friends from Ukraine and Russia who have been through a lot, and they are still struggling and searching to find their ways moving forward. With that being said, I'm sure there is a lot of more questions and thoughts to be shared from our colleagues who are joining us today from across the world, as well as our audience who are tuning in from different countries and different institutions. So with all that being said, I'm going to open the floor for other questions and thoughts to be shared. If you do have a question or you want to speak, you can easily unmute your microphone and speak, or you can raise a hand and we will call on you.
I think that folks will also just have to put in their questions into the chat that's now available.
Mm-hmm.
So everyone can see that.
Great. Yes, Elena.
Thank you, Zar. I feel so impressed and so thankful that I got an opportunity to firsthand hear your own voices. And speaking about voices, I have a question to Tamara, because there's apparently a kind of power relations about who gets to speak on behalf of whom and how. And I wondered if you had an opportunity to think about the narrative around women's roles in the Ukrainian war, and which discourses are out there. And we know the difference between the local voices and the voices from Russia, but the international view on what's going on and how we can understand women's participation in war, from more global transnational perspective. I would say not transnational, rather international perspective. And my second question, whether you felt that there was enough energy among the Ukrainian activists to think what will happen after the war is over, what will be the kinds of mobilization for the post-war period. If you had any energy to think about this, I know it's been a lot already. Yes, thank you, Tamara.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Probably I will start from the second question, because even despite the fact that war is still going on and we are not sure when it will end, but still, even now, I would say from autumn, we started some campaigns and projects to rebuild Ukraine, and it's a view of building up Ukrainian society and country till 2030. And it's a coalition of experts and NGOs. There are different projects, of course, more official project from government and president, but also projects from civil society. And I'm personally involved in one of such projects where I'm responsible, I would say, for gender politics issues, gender mainstreaming. And it's very important that even despite, the war and military actions, still, I would say there is idea and importance of human rights, dignity, gender equality. We constantly have some events and debates, discussions. Just an example from my university, we do have teaching online because it's not safe, to teach on campus. But in September, in the beginning of academic year, we decided to arrange socialization events, because you may you may understand that 2 years of COVID and then full-scale invasion, like some students for 3 years of already, they've never been, they hardly been on, in the university. And so we organized Gender Equality Week, where we get, invited students, faculty for different events. So we discussed women in politics. We discussed in general gender studies and importance of university women in war and gender-based violence. Presented a book on feminism written by one Ukrainian activist, and so it became, despite this popular discourse that when there are military actions, a number of questions like human rights, gender equality are on the backstage. I would say still it's possible to challenge this, constantly debate on different, sexist examples. So I don't want to say that, Ukrainian society is ideal. We do have a number of problems, but what is important is the possibility to discuss, the possibility to challenge, to discuss, to explain these issues and to try, to make some changes and to prove the dignity, the values that we were standing during Euromaidan protest, back 8 years ago, they are still important. As for your question for visibility of women, I think in international media, women are rather visible. And of course, from one hand, it's because it's quite, exotic issue from one hand. And you do have a number of articles where, women explain as described as victims, because in some cities of Ukraine there were mass rapes and sexual violence was used as genocidal violence. So there are currently, so international community, human rights activists, they do, I would say, they collect testimonies. It's not a very easy job. It's, very challenging to, to prove that actually Russia's war towards Ukraine is genocidal war, and its sexual violence is one of the, I would say, also issue to do this. So attention is paid to this particular issue. At the same time, you could see a number of stories where actually some women are veterans, other women are just, coming from different, absolutely civilian spheres, as they turned into combat positions, and they, participate in a different, parts of armed forces. And another interesting issue, I would say, because, it's very difficult to challenge gender, I would say, patriarchal gender relations when you don't challenge masculinity, when you work only with femininity, with women. And as a professor, I teach also a course on masculinity and men's studies. And it's interesting, masculinity usually less discussed, but you may see even from political leaders how the image of hegemonic masculine leader, toxic masculinity, as there is Putin, is admired a lot also as this, not admired, but criticized as, this toxic masculinity, using a rape culture discourse, because you may remember his words before invasion, nравится, не нравится, терпи моя красавица, in Russian. You like it or don't like it, but please, you should take it, and it's symbolically about actually rape. That in the case of rape, if you so there is not any other resolving of this issue is just to to take it, to accept it. But our President Zelensky, that is very interesting case, of a media man who, as a quite young political leader, I think he managed to become very popular for international audience. And I saw some articles about him as an example of, I would say, new political leadership that is more emotional, compassionate, that pays large attention to so-called first lady. You may compare, for example, Putin and Lukashenko. They don't have any first ladies at all. Of course, institution of first ladies is problematic, but you see how this also perceived. And the Olena Zelenska, the wife of president, she's, I would say, quite independently acting, talking with dignity to international audience, recently talking on sexual violence in Great Britain. So even, on very top political level, you could see that it's very discursive difference on patriarchal or egalitarian gender relations. And just to finalize, another example, Ukrainian language as Slavic language, as other like English, is gender sensitive. And, in English language, there was a lot of fights also for visibility of women in in different professions, very status, they were marked as masculine. Yeah, ombudsman, policeman, and other. The same actually way was with Ukrainian language. We were for 20 years, I would say, fighting for visibility of women in status professions, because for cleaning ladies there is no problem. But for women, especially on military professions. So even on a discursive language level, in our studies we were using feminine endings. And currently, you see that for even after invasion, so president in his speeches, he recognizes women as military, as soldiers. So he's addressing or to defend us as male and female. And I would say it's not big deal, of course, but it's one very important also symbolic issue about recognition and visibility. And from these nuances, yes, you could see that step by step, this incremental track approach, the situation is changing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tamara, for that insightful answer. It's really great to notice, interesting to hear how some of the statements made by the political leaders can mean what it can mean, how can it affect the thoughts and ideas of people of that society towards women, especially at times of conflict. So thanks for sharing your thoughts on that. And Sweeta, I think you saw Caitlin's message in the chat box. If not, I think there is a question from the audience for you. And the question is following on the question about international community's role in supporting women impacted by women who are impacted by armed conflict. How do you see the stagnation and protraction of the current conditions in Afghanistan impacting your work? And the other part of that question is, what should be the international community, including media, everyday people, etc., what should they be doing to support your work and Afghan women in general, especially as we see more and more armed conflicts arising in the media these days?
Thank you, Zarlasht. I also raised some of the questions provided here by Kathleen and also by Anna. As Kathleen said, I can go with question from Anna. If I can just go with that first. One thing that we should remember that the war in Afghanistan has not been ended yet. It's going on, and it's not just a war to use military facilities. It is the war that women are suffering a different type of oppression, and the Taliban are torturing women because they want their rights. And also we should remember that now in Afghanistan, it is the war for finding food. It's the war of getting the human rights, and the war are going for education, and different types of war is going there in Afghanistan. And they are the people that affected by them. Yeah, unfortunately, women are more visible now since the last year in Afghanistan for asking their rights, and also the rights of their genders. Same genders, women, and as they are more affected and vulnerable due to the current situation in Afghanistan. Unfortunately, there is no support so far from international community to provide any facility for them to have their own networking inside Afghanistan, or to their own responsibilities and supports inside Afghanistan. Women are walking alone on the streets, marching alone on the streets, and they're asking their rights alone, and no one is joining them on the streets. But that's the truth, that everyone is listening to them, but unfortunately maybe their voice can't reach those ears that they don't want to hear actually these voices. The movements of Afghanistan, of females in Afghanistan, are just something like invisible for the world, but women are trying to get their rights, unfortunately without any outcome. We have seen actually, especially I'm dealing more actually on the problems happening at universities and educational areas. I can see that women and girls must enter universities according to the Taliban rules with a full covered burqa, and also a face shield that has never been used in Afghanistan, either as an Islamic rule or as a traditional cloth. But now they must wear this and enter university. Without having those, they are not allowed to use or to enter a university or to continue their education. And that's a movement. That's something that cannot be seen by international community. How can you study, or how can you learn and you achieve your goals when you're fully covered in a class, and you're listening to the lectures with those type of clothes? Although there is no male, but you still have to wear those clothes. Wear types of there are many wear rules happening in Afghanistan. And the most important thing is that at the time, women are alone. No one is listening to them. Most of them has lost their job, their right to work outside home. They cannot even walk outside. Recent news are that they cannot even go to the parks. They cannot use. They cannot buy private or personal SIM cards to use mobiles. And finally, maybe there are new rules are coming in Afghanistan for women, and women are alone suffering, but there is no one to hear their voice, unfortunately. I think there is another question also by Kathleen that I have answered in some of my speech just now, but also in the second part, that international community, media, everyday people, etc., by doing to support your work, Afghan women. Yeah, well, we are calling actually the international community, international organizations, foundations, and also international universities to support our work for Afghan women scholars. To make a scholar, it doesn't take like months to be a scholar. It takes years to be a scholar, to go through many difficult educations. You will not sleep well, you will not eat well, and you will not enjoy your life to just be a scholar and to find all the goals that you want to make for your future and for your country future. Unfortunately, all these facilities and all these achievements has been lost, and women of Afghanistan lost all of these things. The media is not much able in Afghanistan to cover all the news is what's happening there, because every media is under the control of Taliban. And if international community, we are aware that the head of international communities goes and they sit with the Taliban leaders, they talk with them, but they listen from Taliban leaders. They don't go among people to ask the people that what are your problems, what are you facing, and what are the real problems really people having. We know that more than 80% of people now in Afghanistan having very deep financial problems. I'm receiving not only applications on through Afghan women scholars, I'm receiving private message a lot in my social media accounts that people are suffering a lot even from financial problems. And we really cannot see much of support, and we hope that international community can reach listen to our voice and stand with Afghan women and support them with their works. Thank you.
I think real when it comes to what's happening in Afghanistan, it's very sad to see that there are a lot of women and there are a lot of activists who are trying to change the situation, and all they face in return is more and more humiliation and torture, and so on. And from what I see, it's just getting worse. And I think it's this question was also very important when it comes to how things kind of fade away, because everything is happening so fast in the world. I remember when everything went down in Afghanistan, Afghanistan was the center of the attention. All the news was about Afghanistan and women and children and all of that. And then the situation with Ukraine happened. Afghanistan was still in the picture, but not as much as it was, because we had another very serious case where women faced a lot of the impacts of the armed conflict. And now the attention keeps getting shifted, but I think for people like us who are connected with the network and connected with or are aware of activities that are being done for women that are impacted by a war and conflict, what we might be able to do is to share these opportunities more and more. So as we are also getting to the end of the time, I would like to ask both Tamara and Sweeta to share any links you might have with us. I know you have done that in the past, but if you want to just share it again in the chat box for some of our audience to have it and look through it and maybe share it. I know Sweeta talked about how she is now working together with her colleague and former classmate on trying to find ways to support other women who are going through similar situation. And Tamara also talked about ways they are supporting women and trying to reach out to women who have been through similar situations. So if you want to share those links one more time, if you have those links, and if it's not problematic, please go ahead and do that. And as we have only 5 minutes left, I am going to pass it to our panelists for thank you, Tamara, and thank you very much, Sweeta, for sharing the links. We're going to save these and hopefully share it with more and more women and students who are at AUC and other institutions that we know of, so that they can learn about the important work that you're doing. And as a takeaway, I would like to encourage everyone to spread the word, talk about this. Don't let topics like this fade away or be replaced, because we can't have a horrible situation and move on from it just because something else came up. Everything is equally important, and we should work towards it and keep these conversations alive. With that being said, I'm going to pass the floor again to our panelists, to Tamara and then Sweeta, to share any final thoughts, any last words you might have for our audience and colleagues, and then we can end this discussion. Thank you. Thank you, Sweeta. That was very...
Yeah, thanks a lot. As scholar and educator, activist, I'd like to stress and mention again the role of critical education and access to education. That is very important, especially, in the situation when human rights are being, citizens' rights are being violated. I think, this solidarity of academia, universities, possibility to have more, refugee scholarships of refugees from, different countries, Ukraine, Afghanistan, and others, this international solidarity. It's of civil society, of different activists. That is very important and inspiring. And of course, the role of media. I do think that media attention currently is very important, and we have even now more work to do as just scholars and teachers. It's to provide more and more interviews and to keep track on our to have more information on our countries. So I'm very grateful again for this I would say transnational, international support of different universities and cooperation between different universities and NGOs that we also experience now in this event, and very grateful for your attention to the current war in Ukraine and women's involvement in different forms of resistance.
I would like to thank all the people participated today in this webinar. Thank you so much for your time. I'm totally agree with Tamara when we are talking about human rights or women rights. It doesn't mean that we are talking only about Asian women rights or European human rights or American human rights, something else. It's when it is human rights, it should be human rights in the worldwide. And for our work, it's just the beginning of our work. We have a long journey ahead, and we are going. We are not disappointed. We are still strong, and we will be more strong with the support of international community to stand with our people and our country. And we thank all of them who supported us, and we also thank those that who are not interested to support us. Not any problem. And thank you everyone for listening today, and have a nice time to all.
Thank you very much, Tamara and Sweeta. We have to end here just to be mindful of time. I want to thank everyone again for all your hard work in putting this panel together. We will share this recording with wider networks and hopefully your contacts as well, in case there are people who would be interested in reaching out to you and speaking with you about ways they can support you or ways you can support them. And I'm gonna pass it one last time to Elena and Caitlin if they also have any final thoughts, and then we will end there. Thank you all very much for your time and for being here with us today.
I will only take 30 seconds to say that it appears to me that what is going on today in relation to how women take leadership and take initiative in trying to create peace that is sustained, that is lasting, that makes sense, that deconstructs the patriarchal structures, and thinking about the post-war situation. I think we're entering this very new stage in which no longer we can think of military action as a purely masculine, uncritical, unchallenged endeavor. But this is the time when we're learning from what you are doing through your activism, through your research, how to best integrate equality, justice into how we're thinking about creating peace and security for everybody. I think we all know about the criticism about how women are pushed back after the war is over, or once the revolution is won, the women are asked and pushed to go back to where they belong, quote unquote. I think we're now having a different story here, and I'm so glad that we did this, and I'm so glad that we're part of this discussion. Our part is small, but we're there, and it makes me very, very enthusiastic and hopeful.
I think that's really well put, Elena. And I think we just need to keep raising the visibility of these intersections and just keep having these conversations and connecting the dots for folks. And I think where academia can step in, we can fill the gaps, in terms of the conversations that are not being held, by the media and by other platforms. We as academics and activists can be having these conversations to keep the visibility here. So I just wanted to end with that. And I think, we're looking forward to March, where we're going to have a lot of these conversations as a platform to highlight gender issues. March, Gender Equity Month. So I think just look out for more. And I'm just looking forward to keeping in touch and following your work, Sweeta and Tamara. I've been so inspired and informed, which is important. So thank you for that.
Let's keep in touch.
Yeah.